Hey everybody, and welcome to Cultivating Conversations on Cultivate with Kate. Happy International Women's Month, y'all. It is March. I celebrate being a woman myself, and for those of you who identify as women, women power to all. And so I get the honor and privilege in celebrating Women's Month in interviewing a dear friend of mine, Rachel Potts Wells, who I think is one of the most phenomenal women that I know. Rachel is originally from Trophy Club, Texas. She and I went to school together, specifically middle school and high school, so I've known her for quite some time. Rachel is currently finishing up dual master's degrees, one in Divinity and one in marriage and family therapy at Louisville Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Rachel is currently working as a student therapist, and she also helps with outpatient group for addiction. Rachel has extensive leadership background in youth ministry and Christian education in the Presbyterian Church. I'm so excited for all of you to listen to our conversation and also want to acknowledge the space in this time. So today is March 20th, 2021. And also, while we celebrate women, acknowledge that the past few days this week has been difficult due to the recent events and attacks in Atlanta, Georgia. And so our hearts and our minds and our spirits are with those who are grieving the loss of 8 innocent lives. And we will talk more about it in our conversation. And so thank you for holding space for us in our conversation on Cultivate with Kate. So please help me welcome Rachel Potts Wells. All right, everybody, please help me give a warm welcome to my dear friend, Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Kate.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
You know what? It's a Saturday. I'm glad to be able to sit down with you and just converse with you. So audience members, for those who don't know, Rachel and I go way back. We go way back to Samuel Beck. It was called intermediate school, right? At the time, it was Samuel Beck Intermediate School in Trophy Club, Texas. Shout out. Those
Yep.
were the years. And, we went to that school together, and that was 6th grade. That was when I moved near the neighborhood and went to high school, to Northwest High. Shout out to Northwest High. And so, we were in choir together. Rachel has a phenomenal voice, y'all. Like phenomenal. I'm just saying.
So does Kate. If you don't know, so does Kate.
Your voice and your range is amazing. It's anyway. But just thank you, my friend, for coming to my show on Cultivate with Kate. I followed your journey post high school. In a way, I'm grateful for social media for us to be able to connect and follow each other's journeys from afar, and to see you and your journey, going to college and then post college, now doing your graduate work. And so, I just want to talk to you about your life journey and, from your past to now your present day. And so, I start my question off with everyone having an origin story, because I think everyone is a hero and you are my superhero. And so if you can share with us, what is your origin story? And to fit it with our theme of Cultivate with Kate and the analogy of planting something and growing something, what are your roots? And by roots, I mean, various foundations that make up you, who you are, like your childhood, your upbringing, your identity, etc. That is a loaded question, but you know what, Rachel? Please tell us your story.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I really love that image, that idea of having roots and growing from those. One of my tattoos is a tree of life, because
Ooh.
I identify with that idea of being rooted and grounded, but also growing and flourishing. And I think My roots, as you said, are in Trophy Club, Texas.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I was born in Houston,
Oh,
actually,
okay.
but
Which part of Houston?
uh, downtown area.
Ooh,
My parents lived in the city. They were young, 20-year-old hip people who lived out in the city and had good jobs. And yeah, we lived in Houston for like 2 years of my life, and then moved toward family in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And my dad's side of the family has always been incredibly close. So our big venture out to Trophy Club was when my dad opened and my uncle opened their restaurant together. And I was in the first grade when we moved to Trophy Club. I remember that move. And they're still there. My parents are still there. My dad and uncle still have the Classic Cafe, their first and only restaurant that has been open over 25 years now.
one of the best foods, y'all. I'm just saying.
But I guess, yeah, a lot of my origin story comes from my family, my faith upbringing in the Presbyterian Church,
Mhm.
and and seeing my family as small business owners and making that a big part of their life and identity, and a big part of my life and identity, and also them encouraging me to follow my dreams with that, with my dad watching him follow his dreams. So I got to sing from a very young age because they are dream believers. My family really is like that.
Oh,
And um yeah, since like the age of 13, I've been, earlier than that, 11 maybe, out there singing. And it was my first love. So that kind of gave me the roots, and connected me with my spirituality, I think, in a really deep and profound way that's lasted my whole life.
when did you first discover your love of singing? You mentioned that you started singing at a young age and like at 11 and such but when did you know that like, ooh, I can sing really well and I actually love doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I knew when I was really little, maybe 4 or 5.
Wow.
Um, I remember memorizing, this is so silly, but I remember memorizing Shania Twain's "Whose Bed Has Your Boots Been Under," which is such an inappropriate song for a 5-year-old. But I knew every word. And I
Nice.
started singing it to my mom, and she was like, "You know every single word of that song." From a young age, I could just pick up all the words to songs and would repeat them. But that one was my first love of country music. So then at 11, I started taking voice lessons for country music.
Nice.
Yeah, and I sang all around Texas from like 11 to 14, doing country music.
And you were saying that your parents, are big believers in dreaming. And tell me more about that. Like, what were some examples of your parents showing the fact that they believe, in dreams and going for them?
hmm so I think that they both had potential prescripted lives that they could have lived. They grew up, my dad grew up actually upper middle class, but my mom grew up more lower middle class, in Texas. And her parents are both families of sharecroppers from Alabama. So her parents really grew up with nothing. So they had to create their own path in life. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, wanted her to be this certain way, to be an accountant, to get a job as an accountant because it was the best path for her. And she ended up getting a job in computer engineering. I think that was also something he was interested in for her, just kind of being part of technology systems. And that's kind of the direction she went in. And later on in life, she kind of had a period of being like, I don't really like or enjoy this anymore. So she took a sabbatical from work, to enjoy her time with her children. So in a way, that was kind of a dream for her, to be able to not work and spend time with her kids, which instead of being like that traditional housewife thing, it was more like spending time with us was part of her dream, which was really amazing, to
Mhm.
inspiring example, because she now has like gone back and figured out how to do accounting. She's an accountant now.
Good for her.
Yeah, but my dad also, they just took a chance. He and my uncle found a good deal in this random part of Texas that was totally underdeveloped.
So underdeveloped. Oh my gosh.
There was nothing there, but they both
Nothing.
had support from their families, support from some bank loans, and a dream to make that part of Texas kind of put it on the map.
Yes. Wow.
And it was really cool to watch them, just try their hardest. And even when it was really difficult to keep the restaurant open, because, restaurants ebb and flow,
Yeah.
it was them committing to the dream of what they are building together and how they can make people's lives better through good food.
Yes, and just to set the scene for everybody. So, we mentioned the town trophy club, but the neighboring city is called it's Roanoke, like Roanoke, Virginia, but
Mm-hmm.
Roanoke, Texas. So shout out to the Metroplex, where we both grew up. So I lived in Roanoke, and when I first moved to Roanoke in the sixth grade, which what year was that? Probably like late 90s, early 2000s, right? That range.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe like 99.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember when Rachel mentioned just now that there's nothing there. Y'all, I'm serious. There was like nothing. I remember the closest grocery, and I'm doing this air quotes for listeners who are just listening and not watching. um the only store nearby was the drugstore called IGA, which had limited supplies. You have to drive like at least 25-30 minutes to nearby South Lake, or if you want to go the Keller route. Like, yeah, that was where we would get essentials outside of IGA drugstore. And I remember undeveloped land with like some cows roaming around, right? Like, yeah, that was Roanoke. Am I correct
Mm-hmm.
me if I'm wrong, Rachel? Any descriptive things that you want to throw in there about Roanoke slash Trophy Club?
Yeah, I think my favorite marker for our town is that well, I don't like that there's a wall with houses on one side, but on the other side, like in Trophy Club,
Yeah.
there's a big wall with houses. So it's kind
Yes.
of a gated city, which is odd. I don't love that. But on the other side, there was just a giant ranch
Yep.
full of all kinds of animals. There was this one guy who had like llamas on the ranch and like random animals along with the cattle.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's very quintessential Texas if you think about it.
Really though,
Uh
like
huh.
for real. And then now it's interesting how things shift so quickly, from IGA, like being the drugstore, the IGA then went bye bye. And that IGA building becomes like a police station. And then I
Hmm.
remember the excitement of like the super Walmart being built down the road. Like that was like, oh my word, like we are up and coming with the super Walmart. Well, even though before the super Walmart, there was the Albertsons. I was excited for the
Hmm.
Albertsons. Like,
Hmm.
finally groceries nearby where we don't have to drive super far.
Right.
But yeah. So mention a little bit about Trophy Club and the juxtaposition of Trophy Club to its neighboring cities. You mentioned, like a wall. Um and so I mean, I can describe my experience of Trophy Club to the audience, but I would love to hear from you first, and then I'll add my own exposition. So please take it away, Rachel.
Oh, well, my family still lives there, as I said, and I just came back from a visit to Trophy Club, and so a lot of it has boomed, since we were living there. But my experience of um, it was a town built around a golf course, if that tells you anything. That's the name of the town too. Like the namesake is trophies for golfing. So and there's a country club in the middle of the town.
Yep.
That is a central part of the town.
Yep.
And my experience of that was essentially like partially because I do come from privilege. I am a white woman in America. There was a lot of it that I was blind to growing up. I'll be really honest about that I didn't think twice about some of the things that were, normative for
Mm-hmm.
me about going to a country club every once in a while for like an event or something. But my family was kind of removed from that. We found an affordable little house. We felt removed, or I felt removed at
Mm-hmm.
least. Affordable little house far away from the golf course. The closer you got to the golf course, it was like the wealthier you were.
Yes.
That was the reality then, at least. And so we were far away, so it was kind of a signal that at least we were middle class and not this like high upper middle class
Mm-hmm.
echelon of trophy club that I've never, been a part of or felt like I was a part of. But there are people we grew up with that are still a part of that like upper echelon trophy club South Lake thing. And yeah, I hated the walls. That was something that always irritated me because I wished that I could walk easily and safely from our house to my dad's restaurant, which we used to do
Mm.
pretty regularly, but it was on busy, busy streets with no, easy connections. It's less than a mile
Yeah.
to
I didn't
walk.
think of it that way. Yeah, the walk from where y'all live to the classic cafe. You're right. It's not that long, but with the highways and the busy streets, like it's not as walkable
Right.
or accessible to pedestrians, period. And
Mm-mm.
so yeah, I've not thought about that. So thank you for sharing that anecdote because wow, you're right.
We didn't have sidewalks in Trophy Club until like a certain year. I feel like it wasn't until Beck opened that the sidewalk extended past like Lakeview Elementary School.
Oh my gosh, Lakeview. Did you go to Lakeview for elementary?
I did.
Nice.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
awesome. No, many of my friends are Lakeview alums. Shout out Lakeview Elementary. I came later, sixth grade, so I was too old for elementary school experience, but
Mhm.
very cool. And then let's touch a little bit about um, us going to school. And, I know that growing up is rough, right? Like we all experience growing pains. And you and I have talked about, previous experiences of some of the joys, but also like the painful past of, I mean, heck, everyone went through puberty between middle school and high school. Let's just be real, right? Let's normalize that conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about, like going to school with other kids, at Beck and at Medlin Middle School. And then maybe we can talk about high school and all of that. Yeah, share with us, what's your experience like?
Hmm. Well, I feel like just like many young women, I remember going through those awkward changes
Yeah.
in what felt, because it was such a small town, it felt like that was all happening in a very public way, that
Girl, yes.
everyone knew what you were going through, everyone was meticulously interested in how you were doing, how you looked, how you dressed, how you acted.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was a bigger kid, I never, now that I look back at pictures of myself, I'm like, I thought I was overweight. That's
Not at
insane.
all. You were, no.
But I felt that, and it was something that, is very real. and passed down from woman to woman in generations of like that insecurity, I think. So
Yeah.
like, you see your parent talk about their body a certain way, your grandparent talk about their body a certain way,
Hmm.
and it kind of got internalized in me. So I remember I was made fun of a few times for my weight as a kid in middle school, and I've been, in that doctor BMI scale of overweight like my entire life, technically,
Same, by the
technically
way,
speaking.
same. Yes.
Yeah.
Same.
And even now, obese now as
Yep,
an
same.
adult.
Yes.
And that impacted me and the way that I experienced difference around other peers. Anyone who was a little bit different, I never wanted people to be treated differently because they were a little bit different. Like I remember, kids who got bullied who were much bigger than me in our school and trying to stand up for that, or people who were disabled that we went to school with and
Right.
trying to be as kind to them as possible, because just that experience of being bullied for my weight made me realize how common it is for kids to get bullied just for being a little bit different. So I tried, I'm certain that I failed,
Oh,
to stand up for every injustice that was present at our middle school and high school. But I remember being aware of that at a very young age, that kids were treated differently if they were different at all. And that included me. It felt like it did, at least.
hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Rachel, that experience. I know that, um, you know, uh, you and I are not the only ones who've gone through that. I just growing up, period, sucked. The changes we go through physiologically, right? And you add the social aspect of it, and I just wonder how the beep did kids become mean, like how, and granted, I guess the how could be related to like their home, they themselves have been bullied or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I know you're on your journey to becoming a therapist, and which we will talk about shortly. But yeah, it was rough. Thank you again for sharing that, because I too struggled with body image issues. And I remember, like, I wouldn't say that I struggled with eating disorders, but I definitely struggled with disordered eating. And I struggled with, um I mean, ordering myself pizza from Papa John's, like a medium or large pizza, like cheese pizza, because I think it was one night where I was just home and alone, and my mom was working as a single mom, and I'm an only child, and growing up in like an immigrant home, and so
Hmm.
just coming home and ordering myself pizza with the money that my mom left me to watch myself, and just eating a whole box of, I think it was large cheese pizza, and watching Mutant Ninja Turtles, because they loved cheese pizza. So it was like,
Oh, yeah.
the beginning of, I mean, but like, yeah, like, part of me, not gonna lie, part of me feels proud that I was able to finish all that pizza. But then I felt so crappy afterwards, not just physically, but emotionally. And that struggle of, wanting to look a certain magazine beauty, like, kind of look as like a 13-year-old girl, but then anyway, it's just, thank you, that really resonates with my personal journey as well. um and so, yeah, we went through aspects of getting bullied, and being like backstabbed, and the whole painful past. But also, what were some positive lights that you experienced, growing up, um, where we lived?
Hmm. Yeah. I honestly think high school was where it started to get a little bit better. Uh, For me, a lot of it was teachers.
Yeah.
Having just a few teachers, like shout out to Miss Jones, Miss
Yes, Victoria Jones. You
Farrell.
love her.
Yes, Miss Farrell, who I still love, and who's that? Miss Bartels, our English teacher.
Her signature sigh.
Yes,
The hand.
yes, and just people who kind of noticed the kids who were a little bit different and nurtured their spirits instead of adding to the hell that they were already going through outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
It's like when someone else, for me, it was a new experience to have someone else that was an adult see my light
Mm-hmm.
and help me learn how to nurture it within myself.
Mm.
And yeah, music and theater, I think are the only thing that got me through high school. They really,
Yeah.
without that, I don't, and I was looking back at recordings this weekend of me as a 16-year-old kid singing at a pep rally, going up and down like the bleachers in front of all of my peers, singing Some Days You Gotta Dance by the Dixie Chicks or
You were
something.
amazing, girl. You worked that crowd.
I look back at that now and I'm like, I had that much confidence? Like, I don't remember feeling that confident in my day to day,
Mm.
but it was people who made me believe in myself, I think, that that helped. And it was peers too, in
Mm.
theater and choir, those are the only peers that I've had that I had ever had, I think, that really were also like kind of island of misfit toys kids. That's what I
Oh,
always call
I
it.
loved it so much. I think my favorite memories are just hanging out in the PAC, which stands for the Performing Arts Center at our high school. Like
Mm-hmm.
times in the PAC. So, Rachel and I
Pack.
were both in choir together, and like even in PAC, like not just us choir kids, but I know you were in choir and theater. I was only choir. But even hanging out with like the marching band kids, it was
Mm-hmm.
so much fun. It was just such a fun time.
Yeah, I never ate lunch with anyone else. Like after we started, the marching band kids and the choir kids would like converge in that
Yep.
we had a common space kind of, and eating lunch there or in Miss Jones' room or in Miss
Oh,
Farrell's room were
I
like the
know.
only places that I could eat lunch after I discovered that that was a thing. It was maybe sophomore year that I realized like, oh, I don't have to sit in the lunchroom anymore.
Oh, the lunchroom was just it was just too it's a big lunchroom, man. That was a
Hmm.
big lunchroom and there was I mean like sure it was kind of community, but it wasn't an intimate setting, right? It was open space with many tables and just even me as an extrovert, I was overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
our school to give the audience context, our school we had about 3,000 kids attending
Hmm.
our high school and our high school pulled from I mean, not necessarily diverse in ethnicity, but diversity in socioeconomic class and geography. Because you have Trophy Club, where Rachel and other students are from. You have some Roanoke kids, shout out, and then that small town next door to Medlin Middle School, Marshall Creek, that got absorbed to Roanoke. Remember?
Hmm.
You have some from Marshall Creek, some from is it Newark and like
Newark.
Haslett and
Yep.
all these other
Justin. Yeah.
where?
Justin.
That's right, Justin, which is more agricultural and
Hmm.
farming. And so we had an array of looking back, we had an array of people who attended our school. And part of me appreciated that experience of like the diversity in the sense of like, wow, you have, our school offered Future Farmers of America while at the
Hmm.
same time we had amazing choir program and theater program and like honors classes and AP classes and all of that. But it was looking back, it's like whoa, that was wild. And so to give you guys also another perspective too, or insight, our school was located a mile-ish away from the Texas Motor Speedway. I don't know about you, Rachel, but well, okay, hold on. Let's talk about this real quick. Where was our prom, Rachel? Where was our prom? Tell the audience where our prom was.
It was at the Texas Motor Speedway in their giant ballroom, like overlooking the Texas
It's,
Motor Speedway. Right?
it's
It was
so
maybe
funny.
like 7th floor. I don't know. A high
Yes,
ballroom overlooking the beautiful sights of the Texas Motor
the
Speedway.
for those who love NASCAR, God bless you. Not into that, but I will say on the days, I mean, like, people have snow days and fire days, whatever natural disasters that happen where you live. For us, it was race
Race
weekends
day.
where if it rains on a race weekend and they have to postpone the race to like a Monday or something, I was in a way thankful that we had school off because traffic was insane.
Mm-hmm.
Insane.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, just throwing out it there. But yes. Um, well, let's move on from the high school, middle school, and talk about your journey as you enter college, and then your path to being a mental health advocate, and your path to pastoral care. And so, tell us about your journey there, Rachel.
Yeah. So in college, I knew that I wanted to study religions. I grew up in the Presbyterian Church, not as a super strict follower. I didn't go every Sunday, but I loved my congregation. And if you don't know, the Presbyterian Church USA is one of the more progressive Christian denominations, Protestant Christian denominations
Hmm.
of the church. And we, for example, ordained women. Maybe we were the second or third denomination to ordain women. We were the third denomination to begin ordaining LGBTQ plus people
Nice.
as first as elders and deacons, and then as pastors. Um,
Amazing.
so it's a tradition that had a way of looking at the Bible that really informed who I was. And even growing up in our setting, there were people who believed very differently that were um, still Christians. So I grew up knowing that like you can be Christian, but have really different perspectives on what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to study that more deeply, what it meant to be Christian, and why we had so many different ways that we could potentially interpret and enact the things that we learned in the Bible in our lives. So I went to college knowing I was interested in that, but also I think maybe in one of our history classes in high school we learned a little bit about Buddhism, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to study world religions as well in college. So that's what I ended up doing. I was a major in religious studies, and then I got my minor in gender studies.
Oh, wonderful. Can you tell us
Yeah, in
where you went to
2000.
college?
Yes, sorry. I went to Austin College in Sherman, Texas.
Nice.
So it was a small liberal arts school. I was also involved in choir there, and yeah, it was an amazing experience. I also was a Sally Majors religious life intern there, which means um, there was like a religious group on our campus, and I helped organize events and plan things, and even led retreats for youth with that group. And that got me really started on a journey of caring a lot. As you can maybe tell by the way I talked about high school and middle school and my experiences, those island of misfit toys kids
Mm-hmm.
became really important to me and to my faith journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working with youth after college. But first, I went to India and did a year of volunteer work in India with the Presbyterian Church.
I did
Mhm.
not know that you were there for a year.
Mhm.
Wow, can you talk to us about your experience in India and how old were you when, first of all, when you went to India, and which part of India, and share with us all
Yeah,
the goodness of that experience.
sure. I was in Kerala, South India,
Mhm.
and I was there with a volunteer program of the Presbyterian Church called Young Adult Volunteers.
Mhm.
The idea is that you match with a location essentially, which is great because you get to interview with people who are going to be a part of your year long volunteer experience. And
Mhm.
then you get placed in a site that might be a good fit for you. So I was placed in a rural area of Kerala. It
Mhm.
was called Pallam, and it's right near the city of Kottayam, Kerala.
Mhm.
And Kerala is the state, just for perspective if people aren't aware of the way India is broken up, but it's South India.
Mhm.
And I was there as kind of a catch all English teacher.
Oh, wow,
So
yes.
that is not my specialty, but having an English speaker that is native was something that the school system saw as a huge asset and something that I could work with kids of all ages from a native English speaker perspective. So
And is this
my way of
after your
doing
college, or is this like part of like a study
oh,
abroad program?
it was after college. Sorry about that. So
No,
I
you're
was
good.
22,
Okay.
22, fresh out of college,
Nice.
got my degree. I got my degree, did a summer internship, and then went straight to India
Wow.
from August. And I actually had to come home early, so it was a little bit less than a year. So it
Mhm.
was from August to June. My grandmother passed away
Sorry to hear that.
right towards the end of my experience. So I decided to come home
Mhm.
for that. But so it was more like 10 months. Yeah, 10
Still a
months.
long time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was it like being, a Caucasian American woman going to Southern India? What was that journey like for you?
Well, that is probably the experience in my life that I'm most grateful for because it did illuminate for me what white privilege was.
Hmm.
Um, we weren't taught that growing up in school.
No, we were not.
We were not. And there was an anti-racism training before we left. So right before we left for our volunteer year, everyone was in, maybe national placements, maybe international placements, but all of the group together had an anti-racism training, and it was my first introduction to this idea of white privilege.
Mhm.
Um, but the way that I was treated in India was, of course, a reflection of the hospitality of the people there. First and foremost, it's a reflection of how much people care about their guests, about treating them well, about opening up their homes to people. But there was occasional special treatment that I would receive
Mm.
when welcomed into a home. Like people would cook the meal that they would normally cook for Christmas when I was coming over
Oh, wow.
sometimes and put in just like extra double, triple hospitality. Or and there were moments where I accepted that special treatment without noticing that it was me accepting being treated differently because of my white privilege. And having that illuminated, also just living in a part of the world where access to clean water, access to um, good sanitation, access to transportation, where all of those things were, the infrastructure level is just quite different than what we live with in the US.
Mhm.
We had a 3 week period where we lived without clean water
Mm.
and had to boil all of our water but conserve it as well. So we could only use like 2 buckets a day. And that was a very normal occurrence for the women that I lived with. I lived in a hostel, which was an amazing experience. I lived in a hostel with women who were teachers in training at the school. And they were like, we became like sisters. And they taught me so much about living simply, living with what you have, living off of the land, and being grateful Christian women about it. They were also Christian. So it was, Kerala has a longer history of Christianity than the United States. Kerala, South
Wow.
India.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Hashtag
So
facts. Okay.
since the 1500s, Christianity has been in Kerala, South India. So the depth of their faith guided when they woke up in the morning, how they studied and celebrated waking up another day. We had 5 a.m. Bible studies, and we would study the Bible, but also sing music every morning and every night. So the nighttime was a very important bonding experience for us, especially because I'm not a morning person. But but the nighttime was just an incredible opportunity to learn from each other. And we practiced language together because they wanted to be English teachers, and so they got to practice their English skills with me just from living with me. And I got to learn more Malayalam, which is the native language there, by living with them. So it was I felt like our relationship in the hostel was incredibly reciprocal. I learned probably more from them than they learned from me. And I am indebted to them for the rest of my life for the lessons that they taught me about, that opened my eyes to, this is also the way that I live in America, right?
Yeah.
That I also carry a lot of privilege in the United States. And what I choose to do with that, how I choose to live into that, be open and honest about it, do work around it, that will impact my future and the way that I'm satisfied with my life too. I think carrying privilege and not noticing how that impacts your daily life can really be harmful and be dangerous to others around you. We've seen many examples of that.
Yep.
In the United States, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, so India was a formative experience. It absolutely changed my life.
Wow. And did you decide right after India, did you already know that, okay, I'm going to go and, pursue the mental health world and that field, as well as become a future reverend of the Presbyterian Church? Talk to us about that shift. So, you went to college and studied world religions and gender studies. You stayed almost, I'm going to call it pretty much a year in India. And you learned and grew in ways that you would never really experience in the United States. And then coming back, tell us, what was the timeline, first of all? What was that timeline between India and then you entering into your graduate work and where you are now?
So an important part of the story is that before I left for India, I met the person who was going to become my husband.
Yay!
He and I were going into our volunteer years and in different places. He was in Chicago and I was in India.
Now, did you guys meet in college or post-college?
Post-college. This was where I told you we were all together for an anti-racism training.
Yes.
It was that, and it was like a 1-week workshop with worship, all of the very like a Christian retreat kind of before you went.
Nice.
And so we met at that Christian retreat, and we ended up spending the first 4 days. We were up until 4 a.m. talking every night, just not sleeping, barely sleeping. he and I and one of my best friends from college was also doing anyways. So we all hung out together. And eventually, towards the end of the week, I was like, I really like this person. I really like this person. This is very rare. I was not a big dater back in the day. I was very focused on, really focused on ministry. I knew that I wanted to probably go into ministry at this point before I went to India, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. So I was open to what kind of ministry I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met this person, and we talked for the entire time I was gone over social media and email and Skype, just as friends. And then a year later, after I got back, or wait, not a year later, right after I got back, pretty much a month after I got back, we started dating officially. And then this is crazy. I don't recommend this to anyone, but about 4 months after I got back from India, I was ready to move near him in Maryland.
Wow.
So I moved all the way across the country to Maryland because I knew I wanted to be in maybe not the same city, but very close to him. I ended up finding a place to live on Craigslist in the same city. Yeah, very much recommend that. No, it was not a great living experience. But I had a place to stay, and it was 20 minutes from where he lived. So we got to date and not be long distance, but we spent that 4 months long distance.
Yeah.
And that was hard. So I was like, I need to change. I'm going to move to Maryland. So I did. I got a job working in children's ministry at a Church of the Brethren church there, which I had never encountered. It's like an Anabaptist tradition, very conservative values, but really kind people. So I worked for them for about 6 months. And at the same time, I started working for a company called Sanmar Children's Home. And it says children in the name, but really they are a foster care training program for children. And they have homes, group homes for teenage residents. And I started working there part-time at first because it was easy to get a job there, to be honest. I really enjoyed the people while I interviewed, and they needed help, fast. So I got hired quick and I needed a job. So I didn't think anything of it or that it would like change my life trajectory, other than I knew I wanted to help women who were at risk, young women who were at risk. And that was the situation here. So I ended up working at a bar therapeutic group home. Every child who lived in the therapeutic group home had some kind of mental health diagnosis going into it. So that was how they qualified to be in the therapeutic setting. We were trained, I was a direct care worker, which means I was helping them meet their daily goals, which could be brush my teeth, do my homework, eat my meal. It could be as simple as that, or it could be I'm working toward my GED online, so do my GED classwork. It could be reach out to my mom because I really am working on my relationship. So it was very much involved in their day-to-day functioning of life. We helped cook dinner. We helped them learn how to do chores, how to complete their schoolwork in like a timely manner. But it was also, it was very behavioral based. So cognitive behavioral therapy was the focus for a lot of our interventions. And something called safe crisis management, which is about learning how to de-escalate situations of conflict without using any physical interventions. Physical interventions were a last resort, but many of these girls had been they were either in the prison system in the past or in the foster care system. So either juvenile detention or foster care. That's where they were coming to us from. So I worked there for 2 years, I think. out of college, out of India, and it changed the trajectory of my life as well, because I think it was like a second awakening,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that this poverty that I saw in India was not something that was reserved to a foreign country, right? Or to a country that was different than my own. That the people are being disadvantaged right here in
Mm-hmm.
America,
Mm-hmm.
and are being treated as lesser citizens, in the United States, and are being really rejected by the system, by many forms of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And they're teenage girls, or teenage women is what I was working with, but teenage boys too, being rejected by these systems, by people who are supposed to care for them,
Mm-hmm.
and being placed in situations where they shouldn't be. Children should have homes and families and
Yes.
people who care for them. And when those basic needs and rights are not met, um, huge, huge impact on their entire life in the future. And while we were with them, there were many girls, young women who I worked with who had developmental, disabilities from the experience of being in foster care, who were abused so badly that they couldn't even accept a hug from anyone. A hug was so off limits that it would send them into a panic attack, and this is a 13-year-old girl maybe who's in that state. So the impact for me, that was the time when spirituality and mental health started to come together for me.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That their spirits were broken because of the response they've gotten just for having a mental health issue.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I'm processing what you just shared because, I have not talked much or listened much to foster care and the foster system in the United States. And to hear you talk about, these young adults or some children who not only have these mental health issues, but some of it is from the fact that they were traumatized within their own
Yes.
home systems. And so, you know I just want to lift up you and those who work in the foster care system, and just thank you, even though I'm so removed from that system. But thank you for reminding us to remember the important work in the foster care system and how the system is broken. Well, slash the the system was built that way to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, and I'd be remiss in not stating that disproportionately impacts children, with that are children of color,
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. It disproportionately impacts minority children,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's a child abuse in general, is an epidemic in our country, and it disproportionately impacts children of color. And I don't think it's something we talk about enough. It's something I'm really passionate about, though, and then we do an assessment called ACEs. I don't know if you've ever heard of adverse childhood experiences.
I've heard of that term, but I didn't know that it's abbreviated to ACEs or all of that. Can you describe more what that entails?
Yeah, yeah. There's a great TED talk by Nadine Burke Harris, who is a doctor, a pediatrician, a woman of color, who created this. Not created, but did research, extensive research on the way that adverse childhood experiences impact health long term. And we're talking heart disease, cancer, basic illnesses that many people end up getting. The risk level amplifies with every adverse childhood experience that a child has had. So there's 8 questions that are on this questionnaire, and she gave it to many, many patients. It was developed, I think, originally in California is where she did her research, maybe in the San Francisco area, one of the disadvantaged neighborhoods near San Francisco. I know that, yeah. Anyways, you should check out her TED Talk. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. It's truly fascinating research, but it was something that I directly saw and experienced working with kids in foster care, because they checked all 8 boxes of the questionnaire almost every time. Could check all 8 boxes of different types of abuse they had experienced, different types of manipulation in their family system, not having their needs met, just basic needs level things were a big struggle as well. And so I'm passionate about teaching people also. Like, I love to teach. I think that's been a part of why ministry and therapy has come easily to me, is that not easily. I'll say it hasn't been the easiest road, but why I have enjoyed it so much is that advocating for people does require some level of knowing how to teach information. And Dr. Harris does such an amazing job at teaching people why this epidemic is something that should be taken seriously. And so we use that assessment now in my student practicum. We use that assessment with every single patient.
Wow. Thank you. I did not know that exists, and I will check out that TED Talk. So thank you for enlightening myself and audience members that tool. And so now you're currently doing seminary work, and you are what was the term? Is it therapist student or student therapist? How is that used?
Student therapist.
Student therapist. You're doing your dual master's in divinity, which I'm going to call you Divine Master. Like Rachel Pottswell's Divine Master. That is the title. Just saying.
Oh my gosh. I joke that I should have a wand by the end of it. Like,
amen.
I need some kind of wizard wand or something.
Yes, and then you can do many things and possibly knight people.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it. But yeah, so you are less than a year away from completing your dual masters in divinity and marriage and family therapy at the Louisville Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Shout out to those in Kentucky. And so, so you, after working in this foster care system, did you start applying right away? Like, was that where you, like, because you talked about, like having the passion for the intersectionality of ministry and mental health advocacy, right? So like, what made you decide that school? And I mean, tell us that journey.
Yeah. So at first I was like, maybe I'm passionate about youth. So I took a job in as director of youth and young adult ministries in the Houston area. So I moved back to Texas for a few years.
And did you marry, or did
yes.
your husband move back with you too, or what was that like?
Yeah, he moved with me from Maryland to Texas, and we got married November 13th of 2016.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a while, but it's been good. And we were living in Houston for a few years. He's a comedian, so he really started forming a big comedy career when we were in Houston. So we stayed, I think we were there 3.5 years. So
does he have shows on YouTube or anything that I can watch?
I don't know if he has anything on YouTube, but yeah, if you want to look up Nathaniel Pottswell's, I'm sure he'll have big things coming after the pandemic's over and he can kind of get that back up and running again. But yeah, so we were in Houston, and I was at a church where I worked. I was the director of youth and young adult ministries there. And I got youth involved in some things that I was interested in with organizations nearby. So kind of the idea of exposing privileged youth to realities that were around them. So um, we went to a women's shelter and volunteered at a women's shelter for women who were leaving their husbands from abusive situations. Um, we had a couple of organizations that were really important to the church that I got to advocate for. And so I tried to integrate that into my job there, but mostly while I was working there, I think I found my love of preaching. So
Mm-hmm.
the pastor I say let me, needed some help every once in a while and wanted some time off preaching. So I offered to preach, and it was probably my first time preaching was in 2015. And I preached quite a few times at that church and did some program planning for church services on Sundays. And on Wednesdays, I would do music and stuff. So I started getting not just active in the youth and young adult program, but really feeling taken by the simple act of planning a Sunday church service.
Nice. Hey,
It's
someone's
weird that
got to
I
do
think.
it.
Well, and there was a very creative church, so they had a really beautiful arts committee that did art and paintings on the walls that were themed, and so we did monthly themes, and every sermon was kind of wrapped in with the art installations.
That's amazing.
So I loved that. It was so fun to be a part of, and that is actually what inspired me to apply to seminary. Just knowing and like gaining confidence, because the job at Sanmar honestly was very difficult. I experienced definitely some compassion fatigue working there and
Mm.
levels of burnout that I
Ah.
think were very real and were a systemic issue in that organization.
Mhm.
We just didn't have any relief after we had really intense shifts. You know, it was not all sunshine and rainbows working there, but it was still an incredible experience. So I lost a little bit of my confidence in leadership in
Mm.
that job, I think.
Mhm.
And then maybe just some loss of confidence in myself because I had moved across the country. I didn't have any friends where I was living and working. So
Yeah.
it was a good change to be in a place where I felt a little more like myself, a little bit more accepted, and kind of got my feet wet in leadership roles that I could feel confident in. So I built that confidence again and kind of knew at that point that God was calling me to something bigger.
That's amazing. So that's when you apply to the dual degree program.
Yes. Yes, and I applied to both of them at the get-go, which is a little bit rare. Um, Often people start the MDiv or start the marriage and family therapy degree and tag on the second degree later. But I knew that those things informed what I want to do. That I believe that spirituality and mental health not
Mhm.
just complement each other, but coincide in really important ways for our whole selves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am so appreciative of what you've been saying because to me it sounds, holistic and
Mhm.
um I grew up in a church tradition. It's the Churches of Christ and very conservative. Well, actually, there are spectrums. The Church of
Mhm.
Christ is autonomous. Each church, is autonomous of their own flock, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not like, other churches like the Catholic Church, where they have a liturgy or, each church does its own thing. It's very America in that way, and very white, Um, and so in my upbringing, like we were taught this is the way, and it's very prescriptive, and women don't really have a say or any leadership. And so I have steered away from that tradition now. Granted, I still go to a Church of Christ, but my Church of Christ experience is more progressive, where I lead worship, and
Mm,
I'm very thankful to be able to use my gift in that way. But
yeah.
it's just so refreshing to me, Rachel, that to hear you as a female, to use the gifts that God naturally gifted you with, to be a leader, to be a teacher, to use your voice, not just in your beautiful singing voice, but in your way of educating others, and seeing others holistically. Because, my experience of growing up in the COC, I'm calling it the Church of Christ, the COC,
Mhm.
is that like things are so prescriptive, and it's very much about like the knowledge, and do X, Y, and Z, and that's how you go to heaven, right? It's like, and there's not really, again, this is my experience, those who are in the COC who may argue with me, and like troll me, whatever, that's, you do you anyway. But like, you know
Mhm.
in my experience, I felt like I internalized that because I'm female, I don't have as many rights as males to lead worship, to preach, to lead a prayer, right? To hold leadership positions. And, it sucked out the other aspects of life. Like, it doesn't really
Mm,
acknowledge the emotional, spiritual, even. I'm going to even say that.
mhm.
Um, I remember having an argument with somebody from the COC, and they're adamant about like, this is the way, and again, it's a white male, and this is the way.
Mhm.
And then my argument back is, you're using all these logics, but you know God's first commandment to us, you know is to love God with all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our body, all of our strength, all of us as humankind. And it was an interesting argument, debate, whatever. That he's stubborn, I'm
Mhm.
stubborn, whatever. But
Mhm.
just thank you for addressing that as a spiritual leader, and to address all of us, and to accept all the things that make us human. And so, yeah, tell us, how are you doing right now? As you're less than a year away from finishing. Like, I'm sure you have to have trainings in certain, in the ministry side, and then training in the psychology, mental health advocate, and care side. And so, tell us about that journey. What's that been like for you right now? Are you okay?
I'm as okay as we all are, which I guess is just to admit and acknowledge that this is the hardest year many of us have ever lived through.
Yeah.
It may maybe not all of us, but for me, it definitely feels like the hardest year I've ever lived through. In my recent memory, at least. I I don't think that, because I want to normalize that. I normalize that even for my clients right now. That
Mm.
if you're not doing well right now, congratulations, you are a human being. Like, welcome to the world and the space that we're all in, because I feel it, too. And another part, of me being drawn to mental health is that I've had mental health struggles of my own. I have lived with anxiety and depression
Mhm.
for quite a while, probably since college. I think I had my first, bout of depression in college, and then anxiety came a little later. Anxiety being a problem in my functioning was probably more recent, maybe like probably when I was working at that Sanmar job. It was the first time I'd ever been, like flooded with the emotion of anxiety. And I remember, having to take breaks all the time,
Mhm.
because that just just severely impacted the way I could show up and be there for others. And so I guess this year I've had some loss that's been really hard. I have lost two really close friends.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. They definitely are gone from this world too soon. One was in their 40s and one was in their 30s. So it's just that was a really life changing and shattering kind of addition to what the world events that have been going on. Yeah, and I had the opportunity to do something called clinical pastoral education this summer, which is chaplaincy in a hospital setting.
Mm-hmm.
And that was during the pandemic, right when things were really starting to kick off this summer.
Wow.
I was in the hospital from June until August, and it was a great experience. It was another like formative experience in my life, I think. But also another exposure to suffering and realizing that that impacts me. That it's something. There's another book I want to recommend called Trauma Stewardship for anyone who is working in the mental health field or even healthcare workers, people who are first responders of any kind. Trauma Stewardship is a book that I read last semester in one of my classes that I think every person working in any kind of helping profession, however you identify that, should read, because it helped me realize how much there is a risk of compassion fatigue and burnout for me as I continue, to do this wonderful, life-giving, but also very challenging work, and how big of a priority I need to place on not just self-care, but the idea of communal care. So having friends and family around me that support and help me be my full self, but also, if you're someone who does have trouble having access to resources, or relief from your job when things are really stressful, finding ways to advocate, or even organizations that can help you advocate for more communal care in your job and in your life can be hugely impactful. So that was a long answer to that question.
Oh, I love it.
But I'm doing okay. I think I'm keeping my head above water, and I have right now, what school looks like for me is it's all online and remote. And that includes 9 clients, supervision with a supervisor who's clinically licensed in marriage and family therapy. So that will be a reality. I'll have supervision until I get licensed, but we start it in school. And that's been a really great experience. And there's also like things like live supervision where there's a group of people that many people add their expertise to having like a live client. And we do that all via Zoom, which sounds nerve-wracking, but clients really benefit from having a diverse perspective. I love the group supervision with a live client, especially because it's diverse perspectives in the room. And we do, Louisville Seminary is becoming a more diverse institution. Yes, not all the way there, but
getting there, the progress,
but is really getting there. And so having multiple perspectives, especially when we have clients of color or people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or have other diversity, I really am a big ally in the LGBTQ community, UIA plus community, and that I want to have that as a big part of my therapeutic reality going forward, to work with that community continually and to be mindful, because I have identified as straight. as a long time, for a long time. I don't know how to say that. That's a weird, I currently identify as questioning. So I'm one of the Qs
Nice.
in the acronym currently. I don't know what that will result in, but I'm a Q for now. It was
The good Q, not QAnon. So
not QAnon, not that Q.
we
No,
not
no,
that
no,
Q, not
not
that
that
Q.
Q. That Q, we can chuck it out the window.
Suck it up. Yes.
Somewhere else. No, but I identify as questioning myself. So going through that process has been just within this year. I've been going through that, and so being able to serve clients who are also in that place
Hmm.
um, of discernment about their sexuality or gender is a big priority for me in therapy.
We need more of Rachel Pottswells in our world. I'm just saying. Like, wow, I am so grateful that you are first of all, thank you. Thank you for being in this space, for feeling called to these professions, and to, instead of, what I mean, historically many churches have, turned away
Mm-hmm.
the LGBTQIA plus community. I'm so grateful. First of all, thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable in where you are, and being, honest about where you are, but
Yeah.
acknowledging that, it's normal, and no one is alone in this. And so
Mm-hmm.
thank you for saying these things and for sharing with us, um yeah, because again, for me personally, coming away from fundamental Christianity to now, I consider myself as a progressive Christian. Even the word Christian, to be honest, for me, it's hard to say because
Mm-hmm.
of how others have portrayed Christianity, and it's not in line with my values,
Mm-hmm.
or what I think Jesus teaches us. Jesus slash God slash the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, like and so for you to say these affirming things, I'm so grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you. So, thank you for sharing about, white privilege and all of that. I know that this word causes a lot of discomfort for many people. And I acknowledge, those who may feel uncomfortable and may dismiss white privilege altogether. And then those who really understand it, like yourself, as a white person who a white woman. And for me, clearly, I am Asian, and very proud of my Asian American heritage. Shout
Mm-hmm.
out to my Chinese and Thai blood. Um, and I learned recently, side note, that I'm part Cypriot. So shout out to my 0.01% Cypriot brothers and sisters. So anyway, but in all seriousness, right now it would I'm just going to say it. This week has sucked for people like me.
Yeah.
The events that happened in Atlanta, the massacre of 8 people, 6 of those people being Asian women. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for us to talk about. And so I would love to share my perspective, and for you, Rachel, as someone who is going to be a therapist, and is, I'm calling you a therapist because to me, you already are, even though you might be a quote student therapist, but to me, you are already doing the work, and taking care of us who are suffering, you know, not just physically. I mean, physically, I'm fine, I'm healthy, and I praise God and the universe for my physical health, but I'm a freaking mess. I took some time yesterday and cried, and I was, doing therapy through Zoom. Shout out to my therapist, Barbara. Um, just because, it's been what, 3, 4 days. So this
Mm-hmm.
is very raw. And for me, in my perspective, as an Asian American, to see Asian women fetishized exoticized by not just the news, but I mean, just the whole media, right? Movies,
Right.
music, television, and pigeonholing us to, being this. And then you have this narrative on the news where, the shooter has, quote, sex addictions and addictions
Oh
to
my goodness.
pornography. And so, to solve his problem, he had a, quote, bad day, by, the quote by the sheriff, and then decides to go on a freaking massacre and visited 3 different spots, not just 1, 3.
Yeah.
And so it makes me, I feel sad. Well, first of all, I feel very sad. I'm gonna name 3 emotions that I feel. I
Okay.
feel sad that these lives are gone. Like, these innocent lives are gone, and there's no coming back. I feel angry that this person who chooses to use his ammunitions against innocent lives, that the narrative of the story is that he had a, quote, a bad day, end quote. And, like, call a spade a spade. I mean, yes, he's a murderer. We say these things. And I would call it terrorism.
Yes.
Um, so that's my second emotion, is anger. Anger that instead of elevating the victims' voices, it's us like, oh, he had a bad day. So that's
Mhm.
my second emotion of anger. My third is my helplessness. Helpless because I can't change how I look. I acknowledge that I'm alive today in this Zoom room talking to you in this podcast. I'm thankful for this privilege that I have to
Mhm.
breathe, to be safe in my own home right now. And that's not the case for the 8 lives that are gone. Um, and like, I've gone through my fair share of childhood trauma. And so even though it's from my childhood, but there are remnants of my childhood traumatic experiences that tie to my present day. And I know that I'm not the only one who's going through this emotion of helplessness, tied with anger, tied with sadness. I just want to say thank you, Rachel, for being a white ally. And to me, saying white privilege doesn't mean that I hate white people.
No.
I love people of all races, of all colors, of all backgrounds. The thing that I don't appreciate is, um, people, regardless if you're white or non-white, saying that privileges are not real, for dismissing that there are a lot of systemic issues that are happening, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And
Right.
how, especially, I mean, like, this event, right? You deal with, there's the racial factor, that sure, he might not the shooter might not say, oh, it wasn't racially motivated. Bro, it was.
It
um
was.
yes, but then you have the gender dimension, right? And then when you the intersectionality of Asian women together,
Mhm.
and I identify as both. Yeah, it hits close to here, to my heart, and I'm pounding my heart, audience, if you can't hear, I'm pounding my heart. And it just hurts. And I thank you for being an ally. Anyway, I know I'm talking a lot right now, but I just, for you as a white ally who acknowledges that white privilege is real, um, and who's, a therapist, like, I would love to hear some of the reflections that you have as we reflect and remember these 8 lives.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your real emotions and real feelings um, that you're going through. Even 3 or 4 days later, this may stay for a while. This is not the only instance of Asian American hate that has happened in this country, even in the past year. I was elevating things over Instagram this weekend about the work that the Asian American community, AAPI, activist community has been doing
Mm-hmm.
around hate crimes, which are up an insane amount because of the rhetoric around the pandemic. I think right now the reporting is almost 4,000 hate crimes against Asian American people in the United States. And the fact that that is happening and that it's silently happening, that this horrible incident happened and the response now is now we're talking about this problem that has been around since the founding of the United States. There's been anti-Asian American sentiments here since the first, well, and we should, if we're including the whole PI community as well, AAPI community,
Mm-hmm.
it is a spirit of colonization that white people have brought to that community for the entire existence of that community, and of assimilation and of dominating even. And to have this act of domination happen in the United States, of terrorism, and not call it that, um, is an absolute lack of understanding of how the consequences of these actions need to be followed through. And it's only white privilege that allows people to do that, right? We see the way that people of color are treated by our judicial system in the United States. We see the way that they're predominantly in prisons and in school to prison pipeline affected by that. And that, to me, the fact that many white people don't see the connection between how people of color can do these same crimes and get a lifetime in prison, and this man gets has a bad day. If that is not an illustration of white privilege, I do not know what is. If that is not evidence of the brokenness of our society, I do not know what is. And all I can say is that all hurting around that is part of the struggle that we've been going through, for that this nation has had for decades, but especially in the last year. This is a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Asian lives matter, and Asian American, Pacific Islander lives matter. That is a part of this movement, and just saying that these minority lives matter and lifting up activists who have been doing the work is, as a white ally, the best way that I can be a part of the conversation, because my part of the conversation right now is to show up and to listen and to learn, but also, when I have the opportunity to preach, to not shy away from preaching about these things at the pulpit, because I believe that my faith is political, that I believe the things that I believe because of the Jesus that I follow, who is in the Bible.
Amen.
And people might think of it as progressive or radical, but actually I think it's a truer form of Christianity to be with the marginalized, because that is how Jesus walked, to walk with the marginalized, to be with the outcasts. That is who Jesus was. And so for me, it's so important to have these discussions and to continue having them in the church, but also to continue having them in the public sphere, so that those things can integrate eventually, that the way we all show up as people can be more holistic. This is part of it, having these difficult conversations and being honest about what's going on in the world and how it's impacting you. I'm so grateful that you shared how you felt this week, and just know that I am holding each victim and their families in my heart, and they have been my gratitude list this week. All of their names are my gratitude list in the morning this week, because those are lives of human beings with families, and they were lost. They deserve to be honored. just the way anyone else would be honored after their death.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you
Yeah,
for standing with us in solidarity. Um,
always will.
and thank you for using your privilege to lean in and to not be dismissive. Because I am experiencing burnout and fatigue from having
Yeah.
to, because I like to argue and I like to fight and confront. I don't do passive aggressive well. I I guess that's the Texas upbringing in me. Um, and sometimes, I just want to fight every war, every battle, but I also have to acknowledge that I need to conserve my energy and
hmm
self-care. Um,
Yes, for my clients who are people of color, that reality is so real that the burnout that can occur from just having these discussions over and over again. So I did want to ask you, do you want to talk about this or are you exhausted? and
yes.
and I'm exhausted is always a valid answer to that.
Yeah.
So calling in, and not pressuring is such an important thing to do as a white ally, but also like, sorry if I interrupted in any way.
Not at
I
all.
just I want to say that like these conversations in our bubbles are also harmful. In our little social media bubbles, they get
Right.
perpetuated in really difficult ways. So conserving that energy, realizing when you need that self-care, such a vital part of doing what you can to take care of yourself. Um, and I'm glad you're doing that this week. Just realizing I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. I just so appreciate um you and others. Shout out to others who are joining us in combating racism and
hmm
really being intentional about being an anti-racist.
hmm
So thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart and the top of my heart, all of my heart. Just thank you, all of it. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
though I
you.
feel exhausted, I also have this passion and this energy to be okay with talking about it. It actually
hmm
helps me, and other people might cope differently, but my way of coping as an extrovert is to process information externally, to be
hmm
able to articulate and share my thoughts verbally and written. I
hmm
have a journal that I write my joys, my sorrows, my laments, my anger at God, at people, at all the things, and
hmm
I'm thankful in my religious beliefs and in Rachel's religious beliefs, as followers of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Our God is big enough to handle
hmm
the anger that we have against God. So
hmm
I'm
Yeah,
grateful
and
for
it's you said the word trauma earlier, and I mentioned that book, Trauma Stewardship, and just to recognize that this is trauma, that this is a traumatic experience, but it's also a result of generational trauma. There's so much about what happened in Atlanta that is another experience of trauma for this community, and I'm really glad that we talked about it. So thanks for bringing it
that. Thank you,
to
my
light.
friend. Just
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you, thank you.
You're
And
Thank you for having me and having these discussions, because and having the discussions you've had with the amazing guests you've had so far, because it's so, I mean, it's undervalued to just sit and have a discussion about who people are and where they come from and how that forms the work that they're doing in the world, but I value it so highly. I just want you to know that this is an incredible adventure that you're on in doing this podcast and showing people that holistic side of life, with that philosophy of cultivating your roots and growing, like I can just see how much you are cultivating that in your life by not just facilitating these conversations, but by being who you are authentically too.
Thank you, my friend. It's just thank you. Um, okay, I, have done this with all of my guests, but I do want to ask a few questions and then we're going to get to the fun parts now.
Okay.
So you talked a little bit about, like compassion fatigue and those in the helping profession, right? And I love that term, even though I don't love the fatigue part, but I'm so glad that we're able to address, that compassion fatigue is real. And so is the importance of self-care. So Rachel, like what have been some things that you have done to care for yourself? And what advice do you have for, those who are in helping professions, or maybe they're not in the professions per se, but I think of, people who take care of family members who are elderly, or, others who have to really step it up and be a caretaker almost full time. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just can you talk to us about your self-care methods, what you do, and advice for you as someone who's in the health advocate, field? Like, what are some advice that you have for others to take care of themselves
Mhm.
when going through compassion fatigue or fatigue and just in general?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I always like to say, even to my clients, that I don't love to give advice, but I like to share what works for me.
Oh, even
So,
the framing of that. Okay, yes.
so here's what works for me. I do not think that self care is a catch all. It doesn't look the same for everybody,
I
right?
love that.
We all have different lives, different contexts, different cultural realities, different differences that are beautiful and should be celebrated. So if you work a job where you have to wake up at 5 a.m. and you have no time to do any of this stuff that I'm saying, fit some of these things into your own life, maybe. But however that looks for you.
Love.
But the thing that works for me is I thrive on routine. So part of it is, some self awareness of realizing what works for me. So I thrive on routine. And one of the things that's really important for me is to get up at least an hour before I have anything in the morning.
Mhm. Are you a morning
Um,
person, by the way?
I'm a no time person. No, I'm
Oh,
kidding.
fair enough.
No, I'm not a morning person. But that is nice because I don't have to be around any people for that 1 hour. So I can just be myself fully for that 1 hour because no one's awake and my husband is really not a
Is he
morning
a night
person.
owl?
Yes, so he will
Okay.
never be awake. If I'm awake at um 7 a.m., he will never be awake that early by choice, unless it's for work. So, so for me, it's that guaranteed alone time, guaranteed quiet time that is really essential. And I wake up in the morning, I make tea and oatmeal because I can pour boiling water into both and it's done. And then that's my routine right now in quarantine because I used to make breakfast like every morning.
Hmm.
But now I need it to be simpler. That wasn't working for me anymore. So just an example of, that used to work for me. Making an elaborate breakfast for myself every morning was a self care thing that I did, but it does not work for me anymore. I need it to be quick so that I can sit down and kind of be alone with my thoughts.
Hmm.
So, right now, I do some gratitude journaling in the morning, and I also read some literature from an organization called Al Anon. So, I'm a part of Al Anon, which is a spiritual program based in the 12 steps for people who have family members that suffer from alcoholism or addiction.
Hmm.
So I've been a part of that for 2 years now, and I read some of their literature every morning because it always starts off on a just kind of a positive note, a positive thought, and that usually includes some prayer. I like to write my prayers. I'm not a big out loud prayer when I'm by myself. I can do it in public settings, but by myself, I like to write. That's one of my big coping skills is journaling and writing. So that's a big self care thing. And then I have a nighttime routine too. Um, I usually shower at night and read a little bit, have some tea, journal. So
Hmm.
it's similar to my morning routine, but it has some like, because I'm not a great sleeper, I need some calming effect. So that's why I shower.
Hmm.
And I even like put on nice fancy lotion
Oh,
because
yes.
it makes me feel good. And yeah, it's
Sure.
just, it's
Is it
not an
lavender
expensive.
scented? Like, is it like a scent that's like
Of
calming?
course. Yeah, it's always lavender scented in some variation. I think right now I'm using the Aveeno nighttime,
Okay.
but I just, just splurge on one thing of fancy lotion at nighttime and massage your feet while you're in bed. That's something I do sometimes too.
Ooh, good
It's a
to
really
know.
great, yeah, that's a really great self care for me. Also, if it's sunny outside, I need to get outside and move.
Yes.
And I'm not a big, I walk, so I don't
Hmm.
do any complicated or strenuous exercise usually. It's like yoga and walking for
That's
me.
amazing. That's my routine lately too.
Hmm.
That's amazing. Wow. And again, I just appreciated what you said at the beginning, how self-care is not a catch-all. I forget that. And so thank you because, the extrovert me likes to, preach the good news, right? Of like things that are
Hmm.
sometimes catch-alls, like self-care.
Sure,
And
sure.
so it's incredible. And then I'm thankful that you remind us that, self-care, like for me, self-care could be, when the pandemic's over, I have faith. I'm going to say when, not if. When the pandemic's over, my self-care is going to Sky High Trampoline Center and like jumping, like that's my self-care.
Amazing. Oh
Like,
my gosh.
you know,
That's a great idea.
things like that where like I'm a big kid, like,
Yeah.
and so I enjoy like extroverted fun activities, and for some people it's like hard pass, and so I have to remember like not everyone's like you, Kate. So um,
No, that sounds like so much fun. I want to go jump on a trampoline with you somewhere.
or
Let's
is
go
it,
do
oh
that.
my goodness, I wonder if they have places like that in Kentucky where y'all are.
I don't know. I know that I wanted to try like a rock climbing gym because I used to be really scared of it, but I kind of thought it would be really fun to like as a kid I was scared. But I thought as an adult, like maybe I could conquer that thing.
Yeah,
So
so
I might
have you
try
rock
it.
climbed before?
Yes, but as
Okay.
a like teenager in youth group. So there was
Oh,
like the stress of my peers watching me. I would anxiously stop like halfway up every time and never make it to the top. So I want to make it to the
now is
top.
this indoor or outdoor rock climbing?
Well, I've done both. I've done
You.
outdoor before. Yeah, I mean, as a youth director, I did that stuff sometimes too. And the kids would be cheering me on, and I did get to the top of an outdoor one, but not the indoor ones. I
Hey,
don't know why.
steps.
Yeah. Oh, a big one I want to say too that is self care that a lot of people don't think is self care is taking your medicine. If you have medicine prescribed to you,
Mhm.
it is self care to take your medicine
Yes.
every day and also eat in a way that makes your body feel good. I don't want to preach about that, but it helps your mental health so much to
Mhm.
just to at the very least take your medicine. If you eat junk all day, that's fine, but take your medicine. Like
Yes.
that is an excellent self-care thing that no I never even knew that like taking meds was self-care, but it really has
Wow.
been an important thing as a therapist to like talk to my clients about. Go to the doctor, go to the dentist, those kinds of things that are they're not sexy like going to get your nails done or getting a facial, but but they're so important.
Mhm. Thank you for that reminder. I am privileged to like not have to take regular medications yet, but I know that that day will come,
Mhm.
but thank you for that reminder, the essentials of taking our medications if we are prescribed those medications. And yeah, basic things that we need to make sure that we're okay first.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you, Rachel. That's fabulous. Fabulous tips. And so now, well, I got to ask you this too. Like, what are your goals for this upcoming year? I know that, we're in the middle-ish of March, and what's the goal for you for 2021? Or goals, not just one goal. Goals.
Yeah, I mean, my main goal is to graduate in December
Whoop, whoop. Okay.
and move somewhere fun. We are looking at a bunch of different cities where my spouse can do comedy and really kind of.
Los Angeles.
I want to go to LA. He is not the biggest fan of the traffic, so
Yeah, traffic does suck here.
he's a big fan of which I get because he's from Maryland, right? Baltimore has great public transport.
Yes.
DC has great public transport. So Chicago is like his favorite city in the world.
Okay.
Great public transport.
Yes.
Great city for comedy and for everything. So we might move there. We might move to We're looking at Denver too, and Philadelphia. I think those are the three that we're kind of focusing our attention on right now.
Okay. So possibly move, you graduating.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's well, I selfishly want you to move to LA, but I understand because traffic sucks so much here. But I'm a fan of Denver because my fiance's family is based in Colorado, so we frequently go to Denver, and so it'll be cool to see you if you move there. But we also have some family, in Wisconsin, and so I know that's near Chicago, and so
yeah,
hopefully one day. I know we haven't seen each other in person, and oh my goodness,
forever.
for over 10 years, right?
I know.
No, longer than that, since high school.
Yeah, it still feels like not a day has passed, though, talking to you today. It's awesome.
I do feel like our friendship, I think, is one of those friendships where we can pick things up where we left off. And for that, I'm grateful because not all friendships are like that.
Me too.
So
I'm really grateful
for that. Okay, last question. I'm going to ask speed round robin or whatever that's called. Let's just go with it. And just to ask real quick, did you listen to my other two podcasts in its fullness or no?
I didn't get to the full. No, I only
That's
got
fine.
halfway through both on the plane.
Good, because okay, so the speed round is going to be a surprise for you then. Okay.
Okay.
Are you ready? Let's do this. Favorite food?
Ooh, it's gonna sound weird, but eggs. Eggs are my favorite food.
How do you like them cooked?
I like them over easy.
Me too. Okay.
Yay.
The yolk. Just I mean, I know like on social media you have the hashtags like food porn or whatever, like the egg yolk experience is the runny egg. Okay.
It sounds boring, but it's like luxurious on anything.
Girl, yes.
So
and it just tastes so good when it comes out. And anyway, okay. I'm hijacking this speed round. Let me just ask you more questions.
Go.
Okay. Favorite song?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Well, okay, so my traditional, first ever favorite song is Stardust by Nat King Cole.
Ooh.
Which is a beautiful old ballad. And I love Nat King Cole and Natalie Cole. I would listen to them all the time. My parents have good taste in music. So yeah, that's my all-time favorite song, Stardust by Nat King Cole.
Hey. Good to know. I mean, you mentioned Nat King Cole and Natalie Cole. Can you and I do a quick duet right now of Unforgettable?
Oh, I would love that.
Okay. Do you want to be Nat King or do you want to be Natalie? Who do you want to be?
Oh, I don't know. Do they come in at different times?
Yeah, so he starts off as like dun 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 dun, and then he comes in and then she like echoes.
Okay. You start because you have that low, that lovely low tone still, I think, right?
Let's do it. Okay. Ready? We're gonna do it a cappella.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Let me get my hair straightener as my microphone.
Oh, perfect. I'll have mine.
All right.
phone is my microphone.
Love it. Actually, my phone works better because it's not okay. Huh? Let's do my phone. Okay, ready? All right. Unforgettable. That's what you are.
Unforgettable, though near or far.
Yes. Like a song of love that clings to me.
How the thought of you does things to me. Oh, never before has someone been more. Yeah, they're so amazing. Yay!
No, I miss singing with you. Oh my goodness. Okay, last last question, and this one is it's going to be thought provoking, but there are no rules, and it also plays with your creativity muscles and problem solving muscles. So here's the prompt, and I've asked this with the other two interviewees, and you're the third person that I'm asking this to. If you were a piece of Lego stuck in a blender, how would you get yourself out?
Huh. Wait, would I die if I got blended?
No questions. You know.
Okay.
Creativity. Lego.
Because my instinct is very morbid. It's like, just get blended up and like be dust.
No!
You'll blow, and like from dust we came and from dust we'll return. I'll be a Lego dust. Okay, that's plastic. That's bad for the environment.
That's right.
Okay, so here's what I really hope. I hope that someone pours like milk into the blender, and and they do it and they forget that they're about to overflow the blender, but suddenly I overflow on like a wave of almond milk or oat milk, or I don't, because that's what I drink. I don't drink regular milk anymore.
Me neither. Yes, I'm so lactose sensitive.
Me too.
But yes, shout out to Oatly. Shout out to almond milk.
Oatly. Yes. Yes, I'd like to float on a river of Oatly out of the blender. Mm-hmm. That's how I get out.
So good. I like that because you are recognizing like, yes, the blender is functional in helping smoothies and stuff, and eventually, things like milk and other liquids come in to help you to like swim up and float up and just get out safely.
Yeah.
So, beautiful.
That's such a funny question. I love it. Oh my gosh.
No,
I'll have to listen back and hear that way other people like answered it, because that is a fascinating question to ask people, I'm sure.
And I got to give a shout out to my former colleague, Molly, who, when we were working together, in interviews, we would ask our students those questions. And so,
oh my God.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? It's just so fun.
I love it.
Well, my friend Rachel, just thank you again for providing your time and being vulnerable and showing your strength and your gifts and talents on Cultivate with Kate. Do you have any last words for us audience members with, the wisdom that you want to impart to people?
I will say that I think each person is gifted with an inner wisdom by God, and I just encourage people to listen to that inner wisdom that you have, and care for yourself, love your community, love your neighbor, and do good. I think that's my last 2 cents. I don't know. I believe everyone has that capacity within them, that divine wisdom. And I hope that everyone can guide themselves with that today and for the rest of the week, hopefully. But Kate, I cannot tell you how much fun this was. I'm so grateful to you for having me. I feel honored to be a part of this, really and truly. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend, for the friendship that we've had since we were youngins to the present day. And audience members, I hope you feel so enriched and so blessed by this conversation on Cultivate with Kate. Rachel Potts Wells, everybody. Thank you so much.